The honourable member for Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to speak to this speech from the throne, because the thing about a speech from the throne is it gives us an opportunity to reset our clock, to say the things we talked about before the election aren't valid anymore, because this thing called COVID-19, this pandemic, began to take us all off track. All of the old systems we had, economic, social, etc., aren't working anymore. We're in a new world, and we have to do something about it. I think we expected COVID-19 would last, and we'd be out of it now. We now see we're braced for a second tsunami of COVID-19 that's obviously, we hear, globally going to be worse than the first. So here's the thing. This speech from the throne said we found out that we have to reset new systems because the old ones left a lot of people very vulnerable and let a lot of people down. So the first thing in the speech from the throne was that this government decided that if we did not do something to contain the spread of COVID-19, nothing that we ever do, whatever we do for businesses, for individuals, for jobs, is not going to be sustainable, and it's not going to be able to be permanent, because COVID will be standing there, and COVID-19 doesn't give a fig about jobs. It doesn't care about boundaries. It doesn't care what province you're in and what territory you're in. It's a global pandemic. So one of the things we decided was that we were going to have to talk about how we create, not only how we help Canadians, workers and individuals and families and businesses through the second wave, but what are we going to do to make sure that, because we have a AAA rating, we're the only country in the world beside Germany that has a AAA rating, that we can borrow from ourselves at 0.25%, so that Canadians businesses don't have to borrow from the banks at 5%, or use their credit cards at 19%, or even remortgage their homes to be able to just carry on and be supported during this pandemic. So we talked about how we expanded. We brought back new support systems. CERB has now been taken over by a new CRB that is going to take them on. People will be moved into EI. So there would be a seamless way for individuals to be supported. And interestingly enough, individuals who are self-employed and individuals who are in the gig economy who never were covered by EI and are now going to be covered. We looked at how we were going to support seniors who have fallen in between the cracks in the old system, mainly because a lot of the system is about innovation and it's about Wi-Fi, and many seniors are too poor to afford that. At least in my riding, they are. And looking at how we help them to get more financial stability during this difficult time when they're afraid that they'll be kicked out of the places in which they live. And we looked at the people who are very vulnerable, the homeless, people who have substance use disorders, and how do we help them? And we brought in an emergency rapid fund to say homelessness increases our susceptibility to COVID. So let's get people who have no place to live rapid money to get them into shelters and places to live. This is the kind of thing that we're doing. It isn't a rehash of what was happening. If anybody understood what was going on out there, they'd realize that this is about helping to protect people and looking at how do we diminish spread of COVID. Well, we have put money into protective equipment. We've got millions of testing and tracking. We've given money to provinces, $2.2 billion, to be able to make it okay for kids to go to school and be safe. That's all provincial jurisdiction we're putting money into. Housing, homelessness, schools. So we don't care. We're the government of Canada. We want to help all Canadians. We're not discriminating against what province you come from. And that's what we're doing in this speech from the throne. We're there. We have vaccines now lined up, millions of vaccines, so that every single Canadian, no matter how poor, no matter how rich, no matter what they do, will be able to have access to a vaccine. The tracking and testing mechanisms, we have upgraded it and sent more money to the provinces so that they will be able to test and track quicker and to move forward. We have now just got a new test. That's a quick testing thing. But we're always guided by science as we look at how we protect people against COVID, against the spread, and against spreading it to each other, etc. We are, and people have complained about that, we are looking at a national standard for long-term care homes. Well, now, if the COVID doesn't care if you live in one province or the other, and if the provinces think it's okay for us to send money to them. Now, 87 cents on every dollar the federal government is contributing to provinces in their jurisdictions to help them make decisions. So this is not about interfering with provinces. It's about recognizing the reality of a pandemic and a virus that doesn't care. And we've moved forward on all of that. Then we talk about how in the interim, we're going to try to support businesses. So we've extended the Canadian wage supplement, and we've expanded it to next summer. And we're working on the details of some of the things that businesses told all of us that didn't really work for them. So we're trying to deal with that. We're looking at how we help a tourism industry that is stranded, and they use the CEWS. And so this is there for them until the next summer, so that businesses can at least be able to stay, to be sustained, and to look at how they can transform into the new economy, into innovation, so that they're going to have to do businesses different. And we're there as a government to help them with all the things they need to do in terms of innovating for business, in terms of Wi-Fi, in terms of looking at schools and how we are able to do things differently to keep citizens safe. This is part of a plan. This is not business as usual. This is the worst crisis we've had since the Second World War. And in fact, all of the things that we put in place after the Second World War to sustain us economically and socially and culturally are great for 50 years. They're not valid anymore. They're not working anymore. We now have to look at how we reinvent the wheel. We're looking at what other countries are doing. We're putting money into innovation so that we can have far more companies shift from what they currently had been doing to new and innovative jobs. We're going to be helping young people to be able to have connection to their first jobs, because some of them cannot find jobs in this new environment. We're looking at how we reskill and we train people for the current economy. This is a forward-thinking document. This is looking at a document. The economy is always something that we have to keep resilient and sustainable. What we're saying is we have to do it differently. The old ways didn't work anymore, and they're not working anymore. And COVID-19 has exposed all of the cracks in our system. And what we're saying is we needed a speech from the throne to make sure that we not just covered over those cracks, but that we filled them so people didn't fall into them anymore. And so this is saying, yes, you got to get jobs. Yes, you have to look at the economy. Yes, you have to protect people from illness. Yes, you have to strengthen our health system, which we talked about, looking at how mental health goes into the Canada Health Act, looking at how we get people to get pharmaceutical products when they need it. We are working on all of those tranches at once so that we don't fall between the cracks. And I think what is also important to remember when we start talking about provincial jurisdictions and what we haven't been doing, to remember that we're dealing with a virus that is a pandemic. All over the world, people are suffering. And so we have also decided that it's time for us to step up and help countries around the world that need help so that they can develop healthcare systems, so that they can get vaccines, so that they can be able to have equipment that they need to test and track. We're building alliances with like-minded countries, because we can no longer talk about our country alone. We have to talk about how we work with other countries to strengthen a global economy, to look at how we fight a pandemic together, to look at how we shift and change, because this is not the first pandemic, and I'm speaking as a physician, and it's not going to be the last. And if we do not want to have pandemics, we're going to have to make sure that when we get diseases starting around the world, that they remain as epidemics and that countries are able to cope with them, and that we need to look at how we trade differently, and we need to look at human rights, and we need to look at rising fascism around the world and right-wing extreme governments that are denying human rights to people. We have to look outward as well as inward. Again, because the COVID-19 doesn't really care what country you live in and what borders between provinces you have and whose jurisdiction. I don't know that COVID ever read the Constitution. So we are here as a federal government responsible for all Canadians, remembering that it is our duty to make sure nobody falls between the cracks, either because of health systems that need to be there to support them, because of economic and job creation and new ways of looking how to build an economy. That's where we're focusing on. And if you actually read the speech from the throne, you would find out that that's exactly what we're doing, what we need to do now. It might be a time for us to sit down and say, let's stop talking about partisan politics and all of us do what countries around the world are doing. Countries around the world are saying, guys, let's get together. Let us look at how we work together to prevent this from happening, because this is a global problem.
Well, my question for the member, I have two questions. The first one being is, whose money does she really think it is? And does she really believe Canadians don't understand when they're being bribed with their own money?
The honourable member for Vancouver Centre.
Madam Speaker, that is such a cynical question. It is not about bribing Canadians. Listen, we can borrow from ourselves, and if you read the Globe and Mail this weekend, it will tell you what the governor of the Bank of Canada is saying, that we can't take half measures right now, but also we're borrowing at 0.25%. Now, here's the thing. We are one of only 2 countries in the world with an international AAA rating. And we are able to have both the credit and everything to be able to help Canadians. If we don't help Canadians, I would like to ask my honourable colleague, who will? We are government. We are responsible for assisting Canadians in a crisis and in a time of need, just as we did in World War II. This is that kind of crisis.